Welcome back to Bunny Trails, everyone. This week, we have a retro episode for you. One thing I noticed listening back to this episode is the opening hook talking about the weather in the United States at the time. Sometime after this episode, we made a conscious decision to stop referencing current events as current and instead only mention them by date to make it easier for folks who binge listen to the show. I remember listening to a podcast at some point in the summer of 2021, which is when this episode originally aired. And the summer of 2021, that episode I was listening to of a different podcast had originally aired in 2018. And the hosts were referencing something without mentioning it directly. And I had no context for what they were discussing. And it really pulled me out of the moment and out of the episode. And I had a hard time getting into, it was a comedy podcast, but just getting into the comedy behind it was difficult because I couldn't figure out what they were referencing. And I think that just really goes to highlight that just because it was important in the moment doesn't mean that it's going to be something people even remember in the future. And that's something that we are trying to do in the podcast. And I think we've done a lot better job of it after this episode. Generally now try to keep our episodes unstuck in time so they will feel as fresh to you when you listen to them as they did the day they were aired. Before we jump in, I do want to say a quick word of thanks to our patrons. Without you, this show simply would not be possible. Special thanks to Pat Rowe, who gets name recognition on every episode, and Mary Hulsig Lopez, who currently occupies our top spot on Patreon. And thank you to everyone from the free tiers to the top spot for helping keep us going. To everyone else, you can join the Bunny Trails community too on Patreon for free, or many of our paid tiers if you have the budget to support the arts. We are on Patreon at patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or you can click the link on our website, bunnytrailspod.com. With that, here is our retro episode, which originally aired June 23rd, 2021, episode 114, In the Same Boat.
Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Shauna Harrison.
And I'm Dan Pugh. Every week, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. This week, much of the United States is commiserating together, specifically over the heat where temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius, which is 104 degrees Fahrenheit, are baking the Midwest. Yeah, that's a lot. Death Valley in the southwest part of the United States hit over 51 degrees Celsius, which is 124 degrees Fahrenheit earlier this week. So the only consolation we have is that we are all in the same boat, which is, of course, our phrase for today.
I thought maybe we were going to fry an egg on the sidewalk or something,
I actually thought that was a literal thing. It's so hot you could literally fry an egg on the sidewalk.
I guess, yeah.
I
guess that would only not make sense literal. If you didn't fry eggs. But is frying eggs a cultural thing,
That's a great question, and I don't know, but it also has nothing to do with being in a boat. Although neither does our phrase. So, but this phrase has begun to shift a little bit. Its usage recently. We'll get into that later as we discuss whether or not we really are all in the same boat. But we will, as I said, get to that towards the end of the show.
Okay.
So stick around. So we'll start off with the definition from the Oxford English Dictionary. To be in the same boat and its variants mean, quote, to face the same circumstances as others, especially to be in the same predicament, to face the same difficulties or risks, end quote. Okay. So any thoughts on when this one originated, Shauna?
Boats have been around for a long time, so
That's a valid point. Give me a guess.
I'm going to guess mid-1500s.
That is very impressive, very close. So the first attestation, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is in an English translation of a French work, Thomas Hudson's Dubart History of Judith in form of a poem.
Okay.
And it was written in 1584, and it was
Wow.
translated in 1608.
Nice.
But and you'll see in a moment that the translation is a literal translation, and it was clearly being used in the figurative in the French. So I still think it's a fair statement to say that 1584 was the first time we saw this in writing, and the translation in 1608 is the first time we saw it in English in writing.
Cool. Okay.
Right. So, and it may have a longer history in France. I am just not qualified to research French words. So, those of you who are more qualified than me and like to look at that kind of stuff, I'd love to hear the history of this saying in the French language too, which is something that I think would be really fun. But it is just outside of my wheelhouse. So here's the quote from Hudson. Quote, "Have ye pain? So likewise pain have we. For in one boat we both embarked be." End quote.
Nice. It's like poetic and everything.
Yeah. I mean, it did say in form of a poem. So the French phrase it was translated from, Shauna, if you will do the honors there.
Oh my. En mesmer ne vrai.
That sounds great. That would today translate literally into in the same ship. Oh. Which is interesting to me. So
yeah, nice.
So the next time we saw it after this 1608 English translation of a 1584 French phrase was in Thomas Taylor's Value of True Valor. And this was in 1629. And I'm sure we've saw it in other things too, but this was just the next one that I found. So I'm going to give this as the next example. Quote, "He is in the same boat, which is tossed and threatened with tempest, and is some way interest in the common cause and quarrel." End quote.
Okay.
I did. So this was spelled, the title of this work was spelled VALEW and then of true valor. And I was like, I think that means value. So I did look it up, and according to the Century Dictionary, value, spelled VALEW, is an old spelling of value, VALUE.
Nice.
Right.
It makes more sense than UE.
Frankly, it does. It does. Another example we have is from 1710, and we're seeing that this phrase seems to be used in the same way in the 1608 version as it was in the 1629 and now in the 1710, in nuptial dialogues and debates, or a useful prospect of the felicities and discomforts of a married life, digested into poems by the author of The London Spy. And that author would be Edward Ward.
Cool. Okay.
And I actually like this one because it's a short line, but it speaks to me a bit. Quote, "Therefore the sinner and the saint are often in the same boat." End quote.
Nice. I like it.
Yes. And that I thought was, well, yeah, there you go. That's a valid point.
Well said. Yep. There you go.
So oftentimes it is difficult for us to know for certain how a phrase was being used during a time frame because we have to pull it from context clues being used in sentences. But then sometimes we luck out and we can find it in a dictionary, and that really helps us understand what it meant at that point in time. In 1885, in the Progressive Dictionary of the English Language, a supplementary word book to all leading dictionaries of the United States and Great Britain by Samuel Fellows, there is an entry for boat, and it says, "All in the same boat, all treated alike, all in the same condition or engaged in the same enterprise."
Okay.
Yeah, so this was interesting. So it clearly still meant in 1885 the way it was used in 1608 and the way we still would use it today, which is quite interesting. That means it really hasn't changed much. Now, the way they described it there, all in the same condition or engaged in the same enterprise, we're all doing this at the same place, we're all engaged. So that's quite interesting. Now, normally we say that we're all we're all in the same situation, and it's usually not a positive situation.
Right. I like the way that's worded, though, in the same condition or engaged in the same enterprise.
Right.
Like
And
that. I love that.
yeah, and it doesn't give any hints on whether or not engaged in the same enterprise could be positive or negative, so it leaves it ambiguous, which
Yeah.
I mean, if it could mean both, then it's probably good that it's left that way.
Yeah. I think it's kind of cool, too. It's like a little bit more encompassing than saying we're all doing the same thing.
Right. So here's an example of two newspapers fighting by putting stuff in the paper. And this is out of the Western Kansas World, which is out of Waukene, Kansas. And interestingly, my great-great-grandmother lived in Trego County, which is where this is based, in 1887. And that's when this article was written, is 1887, which is a wild thought to me right now that my great-great-grandmother, who has been dead for 70 years, likely read this very article as an 18-year-old woman. The one I'm about to read to you. So that's
cool.
Quite an interesting thing for me to think about. But as I said, the Western Kansas World, and this is from the December 3rd, 1887 edition, in a article titled "In the Same Boat." And it starts off with a op-ed that a letter to the editor, a letter to the editor from Troy Chief, who I believe was the editor and potential owner of The Chief magazine, a rival magazine or newspaper, I should say, that was in the next county over. And Mr. Chief writes, "Newspapers may come and newspapers may go, but you can record it upon the tablets of your memory, and forget it not that the Chief never solicits subscribers under false pretenses or beats them out of their money." He goes on for a bit longer, and there's a clear point that he is trying to accuse the Western Kansas World of overcharging and under-delivering.
Wow.
So the World, in response, of course, when you write a letter to the editor, sometimes the editor will respond. The World says, "The World is in the same boat with the Chief. Its price is the same. Considering the length of time which this county has been settled, it has been here as long as the Chief has been in Doniphan County, although that model journey is in its 31st year. The World has earned its money honorably, paid its bills, and spoken its sentiments. Just as is the case with any other journal which has worked hard enough to establish itself, the World has made enemies, and it is proud of them."
That's fantastic.
Yes, it goes on to make the point that its readers understand the value of the newspaper and are willing to pay appropriately for it, and would not beg the newspaper to lower their price and still continue to deliver the same quality of service. Yeah, so I thought that was a quite interesting response, but I love that end there. It's we've made enemies and we're proud of it.
Proud of him. That's awesome.
So that was an example from 1887. Here's another example from 1913. This is one from the newspaper comics, the comic strips, or as my grandpa used to call them, the funnies. It was titled "Oscar and Adolf Are in the Same Boat." Since this is from 1913, it would have been before the First World War, so Adolf would not have had as negative a connotation as the name might have now. The text is written phonetically as if someone was speaking English with a heavy German accent. I am not going to read it in that way because it makes me uncomfortable to do that.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's offensive or not to read it in that way, but since I feel uncomfortable, I'm just not going to do it. So
fair enough.
And I don't wish to make anyone else uncomfortable with that either. So to set this up, Oscar appears to be eating food at Adolf's expense, and Adolf does not appear happy about it. And to add to that illusion, Oscar is a short and wide individual, while Adolf is a tall and very thin individual.
Okay.
And the title says, "Yep, Oscar and Adolf are in the same boat." Adolf says, "Hey, for a cheap spender, aren't you going pretty strong on those sour tripe and pickled beets, my friend?" And Oscar responds, "Well, what's the difference? I have to live too, don't I? Ain't we brothers?" And Adolf says, "So?" Oscar, "Why, I don't mean we're in the same boat." And then the next scene is Adolf forcibly kicking him out the door, a la DJ Jazzy Jeff in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, as Uncle Phil tossed him out. And Adolf yells, "Then don't rock the boat." So Oscar declares
nice.
We're in the same boat because we're brothers, and Adolf tells him that he should not be rocking the boat then, as he throws him out of the building.
That's awesome.
I mean, it kind of made me laugh, but like I said, I was not going to do the clear accents that they meant in 1913. There's another one here, and this is in 1944. And actually, hang on, let me go back. I said that was 1913, but it was the February 10th, 1913 edition of the Daybook out of Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
Now I will move forward, and this one is out of the Detroit Tribune from February 19th, 1944. And this one is an ad for war bonds to help in World War II. It's out of Detroit and has an image of 5 people, presumably supposed to be your everyday people on it. It has a preteen boy, a housewife, a male butcher or baker possibly, a male business person who's in a nice suit, and a male railroad or possibly factory worker. And they are all in a rowboat on stormy seas, and they are all smiling and rowing towards the sun, whose rays spell victory, and you can see 1994 within the corona of the sun. Of course, all 5 of these people are white, despite the population of Detroit being almost 17% non-white at the time, according to the 1950 census data. But we'll just, I guess, move on and just recognize that uncool that it's not what Detroit looked like, folks. But anyway, so
as a PR person, I can tell you that it is difficult to be intentionally representative of a community without it looking intentional.
I think most people would take an intentional desire to make it look inclusive of the community over a intentional we're not going to bother.
Fair. Yeah,
But the title here says, "We're all in the same boat. We're all pulling together. We're all buying bonds." And then it's got a list of local insurance companies or places you could go to purchase bonds, which include Supreme Liberty Life Insurance Company, the J.H. Ehrlich Jewelry Company, and the Western Union Mutual Insurance Company. There were more, but I cropped it out of the newspaper, and I don't have them, but...
Nice.
Yeah, so we'll do one more. This one's a political ad, and I'll just read a bit of it here, but our patrons can hear more about it, about this great ad in the behind-the-scenes video of the show, which is available to all patrons at any level, whether you support us with $1 a month or $100 a month. So this is from 1950, and this is from the Journal out of Caldwell, Ohio, October 26th, 1950. Mr. and Mrs. Noble County citizen, surely you don't wish to lose your American freedoms to pay higher and higher taxes, bureaucratic government regimentation, and low standards of living as in socialist Britain and communist Russia. Then vote for Senator Bob Taft. This is there is a lot to this that I'm not going to go fully into, but it kind of made me laugh because like we still hear some of those things, communism and socialism and yada yada as buzzwords that really don't mean much of anything. They're just buzzwords we throw out to get people riled up, and most people don't even know what they mean. But
right.
So the one of the smaller print in here says, a coalition of power-drunk labor leaders, socialist and ambitious politicians of the type of jailbird Pendergast, who sponsored President Truman, are spending millions of dollars to fool the American people by extravagant promises into turning the reins of our government over to them. If they succeed, we will be in the same boat as Great Britain, broke and hungry.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a little intense.
That's definitely a more negative usage there with being in the same boat, but the point of being in the boat isn't a negative. It's the fact that it was a negative subject. So being in the same boat as Great Britain, and this person clearly felt that in 1950 Great Britain was in a really bad way, and they were broke and they were hungry. Although I would say that Great Britain suffered much more homeland difficulties in World War II than the United States did, so
I
maybe
mean, yeah.
this wasn't a fair assessment.
Like they were kind of the little engine that saved everybody. Just saying.
Well, I don't know about saving everybody, but
Well,
they sure took a
they
beating.
took, yeah, that's all.
But I am not going to debate the values of World War II. Just simply to say that maybe Senator Bob Taft, you were being a little hard on Great Britain at the time. But again, so our patrons stick around after the show here if you're watching the behind the scenes video, because I'm going to talk more about this wonderful political ad that really just highlights, frankly, the kind of vitriolic nastiness that we continue to see in today's politics as well.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to the more modern examples, we want to give a shout out to the folks who make this show possible.
This episode is sponsored by our amazing patrons. Bunny Trails is and will always be free, but we are only able to make this content because of the awesome support of our patrons like Pat Rowe and Mary Halsick Lopez. Because of Pat, Mary, and many others, you don't have to pay a dime to enjoy Bunny Trails week after week. But even though Dan and I volunteer our time, there are still real costs to making this show, including hosting fees, equipment maintenance, domain costs, and more. And we turn to you, our listening community, to help cover these costs. To do that, we use Patreon, a service that allows you to support the creators and artists you love. Our patrons get exclusive behind-the-scenes content, early access to episodes, and access to our videos so you can actually watch along as Dan and I make the show. If you are in a financially stable place and would like to support this educational art form, we encourage you to check out the options. We are Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon, or find links to everything we do at bunnytrailspod.com.
And when Shauna does the ad read, or when either of us does that ad read, we are oftentimes making silly faces at the patrons who are watching us every time we talk about access to the
Waving.
videos. Yeah. So, anyway, if you want to see more of our silly faces, doesn't matter how much, $1 a month, $100 a month, anywhere in between. You could be $1,000 a month, whatever. It's cool by us. Whatever you are capable of, it would be great for us.
Very appreciated.
Yes, because as we've been talking to our patrons, we do want to improve the lighting for the video content, and that costs money. So
Yeah.
all right, let's talk about some ways In the Same Boat is being used today, and we have an example of a 2016 movie, In the Same Boat, a documentary. It was originally released in Spain, and it is a look at the economic paradox of technological unemployment, wherein modern society focuses on creating jobs, but technology offers people the unique opportunity to work less and less. Which I'm going to go look up this documentary and see if I can watch it, because I bet there were some really interesting points prior to living in a COVID world, and I'd be really curious with the widespread acceptance of remote working during the pandemic, and we're already seeing in some more capitalist countries like America, where folks are being asked to go back to work and go back to doing things exactly as they were before the pandemic.
Interesting, though, that you say that, because there are some things that we've talked about, like some of the trainings we do at work or different meetings that actually work better virtually. And it's like there's times where it's ideal to be in person, to see each other, to walk around the room or whatever that may be, but most of those virtual is better. It just everybody gets to participate a little bit more. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to it.
I will say to their credit, several governmental offices, federal governmental offices, many years ago, as a continuity of operations, continuity of government move, began using telework. That's what they were calling it at the time, and had people work from home one day a week so that they could get used to it and make sure that things worked and they had the stuff that they needed. And then when something happened and they weren't able to come in, snowstorms, we weren't really thinking for a pandemic in that case, but the federal government did a really good job of this. And I think that's part of the reason that many of the civil servants, not necessarily, I'm not talking the politician level, but civil servants, the people who've dedicated their lives and their careers to, trying to make the nation a better place through government service. A lot of them were already prepared to work remotely. So
Because
it's
they experienced it. They had
yeah,
a good,
they
yeah.
already they'd done it a lot, and it was
Mm-hmm.
part of their continuity plan. So I would say that for my one side where I say America is struggling to learn, it's the business world that's struggling to learn. The government actually got this figured out a while ago, which is a silly thing to say that the government's ahead of the business world on that one, but whatever. I guess it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
But enough about us. The 2017 song "Same Boat," which is by Swedish singer, songwriter, and musician Albin Lee Meldo. I probably mispronounced that, and I apologize, Albin Lee. This was the first released single off the album About You, and again, it was called "Same Boat." The lyrics read, "I would die, I wouldn't sleep, I would cry, I would weep. When the night is coming and I'm missing my babe, knowing we're all in the same boat."
Aw.
I don't think I think he's missing because they broke up after listening to the song, not because missing. I mean, still that's
I
fine. I mean, still
mean,
aw, but I don't know that they're both in that same boat. I'm not sure what boat he was referencing, but I mean, hey, whatever, it's all good. So I like to always try and see if I can find artwork that matches our phrase, and it's really difficult sometimes. But I did find an acrylic on canvas artwork called "They Were in the Same Boat," and it's by British artist Alan Fears. It depicts a brown skinned male and a brown skinned female fishing on a boat that's called the Same Boat. It measures roughly 35 inches wide by 35 inches tall and is on sale now at SAATCHIART.com. It's probably SatachiArt.com. We'll put a link to it on the Patreon. And it is listed. You can buy the original artwork for $7,800 US. But if that's a little out of your price range, you can order prints of it too if the original is just a bit outside of your range. If you are interested in that $7,800 artwork, I will also just point you to patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. And last but not least, for our modern examples, I'm going to look at the 2021 book, 2021, a release date of July 20th. So it is probably available for pre-order now. I don't know, but this is In the Same Boat by Holly Green, and it appears to be their debut novel. Sadie Schofield is just a few days away from the race of a lifetime. The Texas River Odyssey may be 260 miles and multiple days of arduous canoeing where every turn of the river reveals new dangers, down trees, alligators, pitch black night. But those dangers pale in comparison to going another year knowing that her father is ashamed of her. Last year, Sadie caused a disastrous wreck that ended her father's 20-year streak of finishes, and he's never looked at her the same. Now, she knows that finishing the race with her brother Tanner is her one shot to redeem herself. She's ready for anything, except Tanner ditching her for another team at the last moment.
Oh,
Sadie
no.
grits her teeth and accepts that she has to team up with Cully, her former best friend turned worst enemy. It's irritating enough that he grew up to be so attractive, but once they're on the river, it turns out he's ill prepared for such a dangerous race. But as the miles pass, the pain of the race builds, they uncover the truth about their feuding families, and Sadie's feelings for Cully begin to shift. Could this race change her life more than she could have ever imagined? With an unforgettable heroine and an immersive setting, Holly Green's captivating debut promises heart-stopping action and a swoony romance that'll leave you cheering.
Oh, swoony romance.
I feel like you could probably pick up on that, what kind of book it is. Despite the fact that I mean, I know both of us enjoy paddling sports and canoes and kayaks and the such, and this race sounds really interesting to me, and I might be interested in doing such a thing if it were real or finding things like it. But even still, I'm probably not going to read the book. But good luck, Holly Green. So if that sounds like your kind of book, I assume it's available for pre-order now and comes out July 20th, 2021. So as I alluded to at the beginning of the show, the phrase has begun to shift a bit. And while it's still widely regarded as meaning to face the same difficulties or risks, the phrase has occasionally become a stand-in for bootstrapping, which is a shortened form of the phrase pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, which means to get yourself out of a problem seemingly without assistance. All in the same boat, then, is sometimes being used to blame a person for not being able to take a similar action as a potentially more fortunate person does. For example, a few months ago, I heard someone saying that they hadn't been able to go get the COVID vaccine despite it being available to them because the hours the clinic was open didn't line up with their time off between their two jobs. This person worked 14 hours a day, two jobs, and they had Sundays off. But the clinic wasn't open on Sundays, and the hours interfered with the other two jobs. Another person, who I know to be a well-paid professional, dismissed her and said, "We're all in the same boat. You just have to make it a priority." And I really felt like this was a bastardization of the idiom because in this case, we weren't all in the same boat. We might be on the same body of water, but this guy was clearly in a yacht and this lady was clearly in a tiny rowboat. They were most certainly not in the same boat.
Yeah. I think I've heard that more recently that, we're in the same storm, but we're not in the same
Right.
boat.
And I think that is some of society's reaction to try and point out that, hey, you let's stop making the implication that we're all in the same boat when we are not. We do have some similarities, but that they are sometimes we are not in the same boat, regardless of what someone wants to make the claim to be. There is a similarly sounding phrase as in the same boat, and that is to sail in the same boat, or sometimes to be said to pull or to row in the same boat. Now, this one, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, means, quote, to act together or in concert, to adopt the same position on a matter, to pursue the same ends, end quote. This one appears to have originated in the early 1800s, and I think I like the message of this one even better. So maybe instead of telling people we are in the same boat, we should shift to rowing or sailing together in the same boat. And that seems like a much more equitable arrangement.
Yeah.
Well, that's about all we have time for today. If you have a modern example of this phrase that we should have included this week, we'd love to hear about it. Reach out to us on any of the social media accounts, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, all at Bunny Trails Pod, or comment on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
If you have a chance, leave us a review on your listening app of choice, or head over to podchaser.com where you can leave a review for the show as a whole or individual episodes of the show. Thanks again for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. And until then, remember,
Words belong to their users.